Hello and welcome back to the Decaf Bubble podcast with me, Abby. It's been a while since the last episode and I'm feeling excited to be launching a new phase of this podcast. It feels like a brand new season, and since the last episode I feel like I've gone through many creative rebirths. Around the time of the last episode, which I think was in March, I did my comedy course, which I've mentioned, and I will be at some point doing an episode where I talk about that experience and what I learned and just catch you up really on what's been going on in my creative journey over the last few months. But today I'm doing a very special kind of transition episode because today is actually going to be the last ever episode of the Decaf Bubble podcast because I'm transitioning us into a whole new era. We are moving into a new season and with it comes a new name. And so I am officially renaming the podcast to the Highly Sensitive Artist podcast. There's going to be some new cover art which is on its way, and yeah, I'm just feeling so good about this transition. I feel like it really focuses and hones in on what I want the podcast to be moving forward. It's still going to be very broad and wide and talk about my experiences, but I also just want to kind of like hone in on that theme of what it is to be highly sensitive, whatever that means. You know, many of us are highly sensitive in different ways. I'm very highly sensitive, and I think over the last 5 months I've embraced that even more deeply, and stopped kind of resisting it or feeling any shame, any residual shame that I had about being as sensitive as I am in all the ways that I am. And so just kind of claiming that and embracing that and making that the central theme for most of what I will discuss moving forward on the podcast. And I also feel like at some point I'm going to venture into the world of having guests on the podcast and talking to other sensitive artists about their journey and sensitivity and wherever we go from there. So yeah, that is something to look forward to for next episode, is all of that. But today is the kind of transitioning episode, and in order to like really round up this first iteration, this season, this podcast as it's called, the Decaf Bubble, I wanted to, because my overall business is still called the Decaf Bubble and that name still feels like the umbrella term for everything I'm doing here, I wanted to actually tell you the origin story of the Decaf Bubble business, the Decaf Bubble community as it is now. And it's a story that I've mentioned in passing a few times, like probably I've mentioned it on the podcast. I have definitely talked about this in my courses and in the Bubble membership, and so you might have heard me refer to this story, which is my year of beauty and pleasure, my year of aesthetic pleasure. But I wanted to just take my time telling the story properly. I recently finished writing a version of this, which I put on my website, so you can read it at decafbubble.com/story. And that is kind of what I'm going to be taking my notes from today as I tell the story. But I think there's just something about doing like a fun extended cut version where I just riff on some of these memories and see kind of like how the story evolves as I tell it, because every time you tell a story, it really shifts and evolves and reveals new things. So yeah, let's get into it. This is my year of aesthetic pleasure. So the story starts in autumn 2022, and I would say the story starts with me kind of hitting a level of burnout around chasing my dreams. So for context, as a child, I always dreamed of becoming a star. I always wanted to be an actress in musical theatre. I wanted to be a singer, pop star, dancer, whatever. I just wanted to do it all. And from around the age of 16, I really in earnest started pursuing that as a goal. I started training, doing singing practice every day, doing every class that I could, doing drama classes, and just really committing myself to that as an identity and as a dream. So fast forward to around 10 years later, and I'd made a lot of progress. Especially looking back, I'm like, I have nothing but love and admiration for all of the ways that I tried and all of the grit and determination I had. And at the same time, deep down in myself, I just felt like nothing was working. I just felt like this sense of my nervous system being shot to pieces. I hated the sense of competition, the sense of like chasing and running, and I just felt like I could never relax, like I felt like I wasn't enough as myself. Like I would be enough when I just achieved some level of success that I had in my head. But the reality is that I just felt like I didn't fit into the industries. The industries felt really intense to me. The acting industry felt like inhospitable to me in some deep spiritual way. I just could not fit myself into it like a square peg in a round hole. It just wouldn't work for me. I just faced so much rejection and I know that is absolutely part of the career, but it was just something extra that felt like it just wasn't working. Every time I would take a step forward, I would just feel like something would push me back 3 steps. And this sounds so negative, but it was just how I felt at the time. Like now looking back, I'm so proud of everything I did, and I can see that I was making progress the whole time. I did end up getting into my dream school, which was Guildhall, and I had a really interesting, unconventional performance training. I got to be part of some amazing shows during my training, and I just did so much. And by the time I graduated, I was like really set on being a musical theatre composer and performer. Like I wanted to write musicals and be in them. And to be honest, that dream has not gone away. Like I know at some point in my life that will come back and I'll do that again. But at the time I was just putting so much pressure on myself because I really thought that if I didn't get famous and successful, before I was 30, like it would be over. I just felt like it would be completely game over. And again, now all of that, I see that, and with the viewpoint I have now, I can just see I had internalized so much capitalism and so much conditioning and just self-criticism and self-comparison, all these things that were just dragging me down and making me exhausted. And one of the hardest things was that I graduated in 2019 and I had about 6 months of just feeling like this amazing momentum from my graduation, launching into the world and being like, wow, okay, I'm really doing it now. And I started writing this solo show and I managed to get a producer and a director, and we had 1 day of rehearsal. And then the pandemic shut everything down after 1 rehearsal, and I just remember being so devastated, but at the same time I felt relief as well. There was a part of me that was like, finally I can stop pushing. But then, after the pandemic, took a lot longer than maybe any of us thought. The lockdowns, took a lot longer. I just had this voice in my head being like, as soon as things open again, it's back to pursuing, it's back to chasing the dreams and trying to make everything happen. And that's kind of what I did. That's kind of how I saw it. I was in my mid-late 20s. And I already felt like now I'd already had this setback and I was even more behind and I had to catch up. And when I went back to do it all again the same way, it was like I was a different person. And this time I felt even more exhausted. Like I was even more aware of how exhausting all of that capitalist conditioning was on my nervous system and how those industries really made me feel. So by the time it's like autumn 2022, back where I started this story, I was just burned out of trying. And my Saturn return was approaching. I was starting to accept the things that I was refusing to see before, which is that this system wasn't sustainable and wasn't good for me. And like this way of approaching things was not good for me. I already had a very deep sense of my own intuition and my soul's guidance. Since about the age of 16 or 17, I started really working to cultivate that. So at this point, it was like the soul's voice just got so loud, I could no longer do anything but just allow it to guide my life. Even though my ego side or my human side was really afraid of what the guidance was telling me. But the honest guidance that I got at that time was like, you need to let go. You need to give up. And that was so scary, that idea of like giving up on pursuing my dreams, because that was my whole identity. I felt like if I give that up, who will I even be? Like, how will I even have worth in this world? And at the same time, I felt this quiet sense of peace that would come from that decision. And I will say as well, like, I also know and I had experienced, and I already had experiences of letting things go for them to come back in a new way. And so I knew that in some way, the only way to really let creativity take its course or life take its course is truly to let it go and let it die. And that was, I've learned that from many different sources, but one that really springs to mind is Women Who Run with the Wolves and the concept of the life cycle. That death is so important, having that relationship with death and with letting go in order to allow things to be reborn. And I really think that was the thing that gave me the courage to let my dreams die, because it wasn't like a half-hearted, like, oh, okay, I'm going to pretend to let them go. I truly knew I had to go in like viscerally, wholeheartedly, fully step into that. And so what I decided was I was going to do a ritual on Halloween, on Samhain of 2022, and burn my dreams. And burning rituals is something that I'd already had a practice in, like I'd already done that many times. But it was kind of the biggest thing I'd ever truly let go and surrendered. And in that ritual, I wrote down this letter saying I'm burning, I'm releasing, I'm giving this all up to God, and whatever comes, and I'm surrendering the whole thing, and I'm taking it out of my hands. And I burned that piece of paper and I let it go, and it was honestly scary. I felt so intense to do that, but it also felt so right. And I just remember like instantly having this sense of deep peace from that decision forward. For like the rest of the autumn, I was just on a kind of high of like, oh my God, it feels so good to just let go of pushing myself, of racing, of forcing, like trying to be someone, and just letting myself just be, just like I am already someone. So that felt so good that I decided I'm gonna create an even bigger parameter for this, and I'm gonna give myself a year to not try, to not pursue anything. A whole year of giving up my dreams. And I remember thinking like, if it doesn't work out, it's only a year. And it's funny because I know a lot of people who kind of maybe have an opposite upbringing to me. Like maybe you have parents who really discourage creative careers, and like they want you to be a doctor or whatever, they wanted you to be a lawyer, and so your whole life you didn't pursue your dreams, and then you just said, okay, I'm going to give myself 1 year to try and pursue my dreams. So for me it was the opposite. For me, my parents like are both creatives, and like they never had any issue with me pursuing a creative career. So from, as I said, the age of 16, I was just pursuing it. There was no other option for me ever that I would creatively self-realize. That was my only ever plan. So giving myself a year to not pursue those dreams, and that doesn't mean I was like, oh, I'm going to turn my back on my creativity. By no means is that what I meant by that. But it was like a year to stop trying to make anything happen. A year to see what would just flow in if I didn't try and make things happen. And by this point as well, I knew I was a projector. So it was like, that was a big part of it as well. It was just learning to really lean back and wait as a projector, rather than trying to kind of push myself into spaces and force people to see me when they just really didn't see me. So that was my choice. That was how I saw 2023. I was like, 2023 will be my year to not try. Instead, I'm going to give myself a gift of enjoyment, of pleasure, of beauty, because my soul was just craving this deep, like mundane life beauty is the only way I can express it or describe it. Just appreciating each moment, like finding the artfulness and the beauty in each moment. And I've always been a very aesthetically driven person. I've always identified as an aesthete, someone who's really cherishes aesthetic experiences through all the senses. I'm a very sensory person. And so it was like a permission to just indulge in that for a whole year and just give myself a whole year to prioritize that side of me that just loves beauty and loves art for the sake of it, just for the sake of taking in the beauty of life, the beauty of aesthetic pleasure. So aesthetic pleasure is the real phrase the title that I gave it, my year of aesthetic pleasure, because it wasn't just about the pleasure of, like how good it feels to binge Netflix when you're really exhausted. Like that feels so good. There's pleasure in that, but it's not aesthetic pleasure. Aesthetic pleasure is different. Aesthetic pleasure is pleasure that really appeals to your aesthete, your artist. We get aesthetic pleasure from reading poetry that just like lights us up. We get aesthetic pleasure from cutting up a peach into perfect slices and putting it on a little gorgeous blue china plate, like that's aesthetic pleasure. So that's what I built my whole life around for that year. That was my only goal. And so I wrote down rules for the year. The first one was like, just carry on with whatever responsibilities and jobs I already had. Because often people think, when they hear me say I had a year of aesthetic pleasure, they're like, oh, how did you make money? I'm like, I didn't stop working. I didn't stop going to work. So I already had jobs. I had a job working in a youth theatre, which was, my laptop just died, one sec. So I had a job working in a youth theatre. I had a job working as a nanny. And I was also building a function band with my brother at the time, which I still perform in now. So we were also performing at weddings. So I had multiple sources of income. But the real difference was like I wasn't seeing any of that as wrong anymore. I had really changed my orientation to those jobs, and I just saw them as my jobs. I saw them as my work, and then I just saw everything else, all the space in between, as like space for pleasure, space for art, and cultivating magical little experiences. And I remember like I was just very extra about it. Like I would arrive really early to work so that I could sit down and like listen to a podcast that really evoked that kind of artistic sensibility, and I would sit there and I would have like my tea, and everything was just about giving myself space and enjoyment and nervous system regulation and everything around the things that I was doing, and making them more pleasurable, and just enjoying life, enjoying the mundane. So that was the first rule, is just carry on tending my jobs and responsibilities. The second rule was don't try and actively make anything happen. And the third rule was actively seek and create beauty in everyday life as my top priority. And I started an Instagram account, and that Instagram account was called Decaf Bubble. And the name is so funny because the name, I actually was really inspired by, there's like an Instagram account called Tender Herbs. I don't know if you've ever come across it, but it's just like a really beautiful, this woman, I think her name is Ethany. She just posted beautiful pictures of her food arranged in really lovely ways. And I was so inspired by this. It felt like such a peaceful little bubble on the internet, like a bubble of peace. And that's really the feeling that I was trying to cultivate. So I just put these two words together. Like, she had Tender Herbs was her handle, and so I chose decaf and bubble because the decaf part for me was just about leaving like the capitalist hustle culture of like racing forward and caffeinating every day just to like stay in the race. I had given up caffeine because it just made me anxious, and I mean, I could literally do a whole episode on that, and probably will at some point, but the decaf life really came to be symbolic to me. Symbolic of just stepping out of the race, like slowing down, enjoying life, not being in a rush to get anywhere, you know. And then the bubble was just about giving myself permission to exist in my own world. Like a little peace bubble, a fantasy bubble, a bubble of my own imagination and my own artistic and aesthetic sensibilities. And so I created that account. It wasn't, you know, any kind of like endeavor to get content or engagement. It was, I mean, I don't even think it feels so recent, but I don't even think Instagram was quite at the height of its like engagement frenzy anyway back then, 2023. But I really didn't care about how it was coming across. It was just a visual diary for me. I had like maybe 10 followers or something. And you can scroll back on my Instagram account right to the very start, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. I haven't really archived any of it. I just posted these moments that felt beautiful or gave me any kind of pleasure, and it was just like a place to collect it, a diary, a visual diary to just remember my intention for the year and really keep myself on track with it. So what happened? What happened in my year? Well, the short answer is that it was the year that changed everything. I mean, I can't even put into words how much shifted just from giving myself that space. It was essentially the biggest cocoon I ever enacted in my life, because it completely rebirthed me into a different version of myself. So what I started to notice at first, from the very start of the year, is that unexpected things just started happening. Like, unexpected opportunities would flow to me. I ended up doing sound design for a play. I ended up just being offered a job over WhatsApp that I didn't even ask for. All these things just happened, and it wasn't like, oh my god, these are the things I've been, like now I finally made it. It was more just like, oh, okay, cool, like the flow is flowing, like things are happening. Abundance comes to you without necessarily you going out looking for it. The second thing that happened is I just started to really experience the exquisiteness of life that I was deeply craving. And I think, looking at myself and how I know and understand myself now, I am so Taurus. I have like 5 Taurus placements. And, if you know a Taurus, if you are a Taurus, we love beauty. We love beauty. We're ruled by Venus. I have so much Venus energy in my chart. It's not even funny. Like, I was living, how do I put this? I was starved of what I really needed, that beauty and nourishment to even fully be myself. And so giving myself that for that year, it was like finally a deep craving was satisfied, and it was like I was able to step into more of who I am. My aura was able to get bigger, and I was able to, and also a big part of this was just nourishing myself physically. I really focused on eating so well and really like enjoying my food, not just about eating enough, because that's also important, but just eating also in like the most beautiful way that I could, like really preparing the food mindfully and like putting it on a beautiful plate, and just everything about it was just so nourishing. And I found with that nourishment just came like natural effervescence and natural overflow and natural creative inspiration. So that was amazing. I mean, you can already feel like the codes, the core values of the Decaf Bubble coming through in what I'm saying here. Another thing that happened is I just cared so much less about becoming someone because of how present I was in my own life and how beautiful I was experiencing my life. Because that whole thing of like, you need to become someone, it only really works if you're feeling insecure and if you're not feeling present in your life. If you're feeling like, oh, there's something wrong with me. But because I was so present, that idea of like needing to impress other people, it faded. My nervous system felt calmer and safer, and I was approaching my Saturn return. I was really changing and reorganizing my priorities of what I really cared about. So yeah, what I saw was this flow of energy, this flow of creative energy coming through. And what I realized is I just hadn't had the right conditions for that much flow. Like, in order for my system, my body, my aura to be able to handle creative energy, I needed certain conditions to thrive and to be a fertile space and a hospitable space for these creative ideas to actually grow and gestate and be healthy, and for me to be healthy and for it to not burn me out. So it was really quite a revelation of a year. And then the final cherry on the cake, or really like the call to adventure, really, is that exactly 1 year after the burning ritual, when I burned my dreams, I received, and I say received because it very much was a moment of pure channeling, the idea for Cocoon. And Cocoon, as you probably know, maybe you don't, Cocoon is my signature course. So it is a 6-week creative reset for artists. And I remember this was like, it was around Samhain that I downloaded this idea, or Halloween. I just remember lying in bed one night and the full thing just came through. You know how sometimes you're lying in bed, you're like nearly falling asleep, and that's when your brain is just like so open and receptive to ideas. I got up, I wrote the whole thing down. It was like, it's a 6-week course, it's here, it's this, it's that, you're going to teach this, you're going to do this exercise, you're going to teach, like give this experience. It was just so fully formed, and it just felt like such a call to adventure, because as much as I loved the idea, I was also really like nervous of, wow, really me? Like, am I actually going to be someone who goes out and announces a course? Like, do I have the authority to teach a course? But I did. I said yes to the call to adventure because I had given myself such a good environment that year for that seed to really take root, for it to really land and have a safe space to grow. And immediately I knew instinctively that the right place to house this course and this new like adventure of me, publicly going out into the world and offering guidance and teaching, was the Decaf Bubble. It was the Instagram that I had created, this safe bubble of space for me, it had become my creative sanctuary. It had honestly become this world where I felt safe enough to grow and create. And so it was naturally the place where this course would live, So that Instagram account transitioned into the space where I would talk about Cocoon and announce it. That's really how the Decaf Bubble was born as a business, as it is now. There's so much more to say about that, and I'm definitely going to do another episode where I talk about the kind of more tangible, technical side of that journey of starting a business, because there is just so much in that. I'm sure many of you listening know, like when you start a business, when you go out into the world and really claim, what you're offering and ask for money in exchange for it, that's just such a massive initiation in itself. And I have so much more to say about that. But for now, I will just start to wrap it up, and I'll say the rest is history. The Decaf Bubble was born as a business, as a community, as I like to think of it, as like a multi-dimensional universe. It's really a creative universe. There is so much going on in the Decaf Bubble nowadays. There are so many people who are part of it and in this world and collaborating and finding nourishment and healing and community and all of the amazing gifts that the Decaf Bubble continues to give. And I just feel such a deep sense of love and pride for like what this has evolved into. And I truly feel like I'm honestly just taking orders from the spirit of the Decaf Bubble at this point. Like it's very much maybe more of a collaboration, but I feel like the Decaf Bubble has a mind of its own. But yeah, since that first round of Cocoon, I started this podcast, the Decaf Bubble podcast. I started the Bubble membership, which is still going strong. And I have now run Cocoon 7 times, which is truly wild to think about. Over 30 women have gone through Cocoon. We've done in-person rounds, we've done online rounds. The vision that came to me when I first had that download was this idea that as artists, we are so on display 24/7, through social media and just that constant pressure to perform and to be visible. And we just don't have enough spaces for experimentation and privacy and just going into that dark private void cocoon space of like play with no agenda, of rediscovering our creative spark and where we want to go and what we want to create without thinking about like how we're being perceived, especially as women, because we're so trained to just feel that gaze on us all the time. And I had a vision for like a kind of almost like an artist retreat, but spread out over 6 weeks so that it could fit in with daily life and whatever else we've got going on. It's a really small group of women. It's going to be 7 max. So it's a very intimate experience. Everyone who's done Cocoon knows like that's part of the benefit. That's part of the like what makes it magical, is that you actually get to connect on quite a deep level with 5-6 other artists who are completely different from you. Like everyone is coming from a completely different artistic background. By the end of the 6 weeks, you will have played, you will have learned new tools, you will have done meditations and embodiment exercises and journaling and reflection and all these things that help kind of like dislodge and break up all the ways that we get set in our ways creatively, and kind of dissolving down into the cocoon goo and just letting ourselves be transformed, just how I was in my year of aesthetic pleasure. I really let myself be dissolved, and what came out was just beyond amazing and beyond what I could have ever imagined. Just like a little caterpillar going into a cocoon. Can never imagine how amazing it would be to fly as a butterfly. So that is the spirit of Cocoon. It's a 6-week course. We are going to be meeting for this round on Tuesday evenings, starting on the 8th of September. It will be evenings if you're in the UK or in Europe. But if you're in the US, I believe that will make it like mid-afternoon for you, or maybe morning for some. So if you are feeling the call to the cocoon, I will link that in the description for this episode. So yeah, that is all I have for you today. I'm really excited to be back. I feel like now that I have like opened the floodgates of the podcast again, there are so many episodes that are like preloaded and ready to go now that I've broken the ice. So expect more episodes from me coming very soon. And yeah, I hope you got something from this story, and I'm just sending you a lot of love and a lot of aesthetic pleasure, beauty, and Venus energy. All right, lots of love. Bye.